Hello, everybody. Good afternoon. It is now 1:02 p.m., and I'd like to call our August 14th meeting of the UWP Committee to order. I want to welcome everyone who's here and quickly review some logistics. If you're in the room today, the closest restrooms are straight out the back door and to the left of the reception desk. And if you're in the room and you haven't already, please make sure you complete the sign-in sheet right outside the door in the hallway. Members of the audience who want to make public comments later on in the agenda should fill out a public comment card and hand that card to the CMAP staff in the room. This meeting is being broadcast on Zoom and is being recorded. For those online to hear what is being said in the room, please make sure that we all use our microphones. Touch the button on the mic to turn it on or off. The green light indicates it's on. It also remains a best practice to continue to identify yourselves when making a motion or a second. For those participating via Zoom, please keep your microphones muted unless you are called upon to speak. When appropriate on the agenda, I will request comments from those online, and you can indicate your desire to speak via the chat box or using the raise hand function. Staff monitoring Zoom will recognize you when it is your turn to speak. With that, let's start today with self-introductions of the members at the table. I am Megan Swanson with IDOT, Chair of the Committee, and to my right.
Hello, Heidi Lichtenberger, representing Council of Mayors.
Heather Mullins with the RTA.
Christina Bader with the Chicago Transit Authority.
Buck Doyle with CDOT.
David Kralik with Metro. John Paul Liepla, FHWA.
Amy Lee representing CMAP.
Thank you. We have the necessary quorum of voting members present, and I can't read that far away. Is that Scott? Okay. We have also received a request from Scott Hennings, representing the counties, to participate remotely in this meeting. The request was made in compliance with the Open Meetings Act and requires just a majority vote of this body. Those in favor of allowing this remote participation say aye. Aye. Those opposed say nay. And the vote passes. So thank you and welcome, everyone. Let's jump right in. Our first agenda item is changes and announcements. We don't have any announcements today, but do have one agenda change. Item 5.01, the CTA Better Streets for Buses project update will be moved ahead of new business. Does any member of the committee wish to propose any additional agenda changes or make any announcements? Seeing none, let's go ahead and move on to the approval of the minutes. We have before us the draft minutes of the February 7th, 2024 meeting. Are there any corrections or additions? Seeing none, do I have a motion to approve the minutes as presented?
So move, Amy CMAP.
Is there a second?
Second, RTA.
Thank you very much. Hearing no discussion, we will take a voice vote. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
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 Any opposed, signify by saying no. And the motion carries. So we're going to jump right into item 5.01, which is the CTA Better Streets for Buses project update with Jason Wald.
Hi, everyone. I'm Jason Wald, strategic planner with the CTA, and I'm going to give a quick update on the Better Streets for Buses project. As you're all probably familiar with, the Better Streets for Buses is a framework plan to guide how CTA and CDOT use street, stop, and intersection infrastructure to improve the bus riding experience. In other words, it's focused on the overlap between the CTA's bus service and CDOT's network of street, sidewalk, and signal infrastructure. Additionally, we had consultant support from Sam Schwartz and public support from Chicagoans across the city. I should also say, of course, that this work was funded by this committee, and we had a strong network of interagency support throughout the project. We held meetings with CMAP, RTA, DPD, MOPD, Metro, PACE, and many others over the course of the project. All of that work in service to the idea that when streets work better for buses, buses work better for people. Every year, CTA buses provide hundreds of millions of rides to people across the city, and giving access to essential connections and providing environmental equity and environmental benefits. Preaching to the choir a little bit, but as we all know, buses are affordable, accessible, and everywhere. In fact, 96% of Chicagoans live within a 10-minute walk to a bus stop. And yet, because they're in mixed general traffic, they can be affected by those traffic conditions and can be slow, unreliable, and when they get crowded, rather uncomfortable. So that brings us to the Better Streets for Buses plan. CTA and CDOT performed some technical analyses ahead of this. We know where our buses are slow and where people are riding. What your grant provided was money for a citywide public outreach project so that we could hear from residents and riders and start to build support for bus priority. Of course, this kicked off right about exactly when COVID started, and so we had to change our strategy and focus on virtual engagements, where we built an interactive website registering almost 1,300 users and held a series of virtual meetings reaching an additional 180 residents across nearly every Chicago zip code. At the end of this process, we had a lot of data and feedback to sort through, and we kind of grouped it into feedback on 3 different topics, including our network of corridors, our toolbox of solutions, and maybe most importantly, a general sense of enthusiasm for us to get started building out bus priority. To do so, we first formalized what we called the Better Streets for Buses plan, which is composed of the network of corridors and the toolbox of street treatments. The network was built taking public feedback and our own analyses with additional equity and geographic considerations, and is comprised of 17 corridors across the city, covering approximately 185 miles of Chicago streets. For reference, this is about 8% of all city streets, but 26% of the streets that we run buses on. Additionally, we built a toolbox with 3 categories of tools, each focused on a different aspect of the bus riding experience, including bus stop treatments. These include things such as level or near level boarding and accessibility improvements. Street improvements, which we call bus-friendly streets, including a variety of bus lane configurations and bus stop bump outs and boarding islands. And then finally, intersection and signal improvements, or what we call bus-friendly intersections, to help keep our buses moving. And this includes tools such as transit signal priority and queue jumps. So that's the Better Streets for Buses and what we have completed. This was launched officially in November 2023, and we did not deliberately assign tools in the toolbox to corridors on the network. That work starts now with what we are calling the Bus Priority Corridor Study. This is funded by an Invest in Cook and an IDOT grant. We're going to study several corridors within the Better Streets for Buses network, including Pulaski, Western, Cottage Grove, Fullerton, and 55th Garfield. And this project is scoped to give us multiple concept designs for each corridor, comprising of bus priority treatments along the corridor as a whole. There's also work for a public engagement section so that we can introduce these concepts and their trade-offs to the public. We are currently procuring a consultant for this project. And additionally, we are working on the bus priority zone. Sorry, the heading here should be bus priority zones. That is a CMAQ grant to expand our existing BPZ program along additional corridors, including 79th, 63rd, Chicago, Ashland, and Halsted. Instead of focusing on corridors as a whole, these are bus priority treatments targeted at very specific pinch points or slow zones. This could be a single intersection or a short stretch of a couple of blocks. And with the idea that by speeding up buses in the worst of it, we can get roll-on effects throughout the whole corridor. This builds upon our 2019 work of the same name, where we brought some of these treatments to Chicago, 79th, and Western. So That's all I have. I know we wanted to keep this one kind of quick, but if there's time for any questions, I'm happy to take them. And if not, you can always reach out to us at betterstreetsforbuses@transitchicago.com.
Thanks, Jason. That was really interesting. Does anyone have any questions for Jason? Amy.
Thanks for the presentation. What I really like about this is, right, with buses, you noted at the beginning that this is an affordable way of trying to improve transit service. And so it provides this opportunity to customize improvements based on what's needed in the corridor. I'm sort of curious, you had a slide there about the street improvements, and there's sort of different levels of investment. How are those decisions made as far as what concept is effective in those circumstances?
Sure. This is a joint project with CDOT. So any decision is going to be worked through both on our own technical sides, bus speeds and traffic flows, in addition to there's parking considerations, land use, and public input. But I think trying to give a one-size-fits-all answer to like every corridor probably isn't going to work. So it's all context specific. What can we get for the most bus speed improvements for the money that we spend?
Thanks. Does anybody else have any questions? Okay, great. Thanks, Jason.
Yeah, thank you.
Up next, we're going to move into our new business, starting with a review of the upcoming FY 2026 core program budget development process. And Kama Dobbs is going to talk to us about that.
Thank you, Megan. Go to the right piece of paper here. All right, so as noted in the memo in your packet, our methodology that we adopted last year set us up so that staff will solicit fiscal year 26 core budget proposals from all of our eligible partner agencies, which is all of you and some others, in mid-September. Like last year, core budget submittals should include work that each agency anticipates doing between July 1, 2025 and June 30, 2026 to assist CMAP with completion of the TIP, transportation plan, public involvement work, and all of the other core MPO activities. The solicitation will include template forms and instructions, just as it did last cycle, as well as a list of data sets or subscriptions that CMAP anticipates having available for partner use during that budget year. I do expect that the forms will be similar to last year, with a few functionality tweaks on things that we found out were a little bit problematic using them the first cycle. So we'll get those bugs worked out and use those same forms again. Once we receive the initial budget proposals, that should be due date set in mid to late October. Staff will develop an allocation of core funding that will be shared with this committee in November. And approval by the committee is not actually part of the methodology, but we will be looking to the committee to provide input for staff consideration before we present the final staff proposal to the Transportation Committee, who will then recommend up to the MPO Policy Committee. Are there questions about that refresher for the FY 26 process?
Okay, seeing none, let's roll right into the methodology review.
All right. So this should be a little bit more robust discussion, I hope. So that methodology that we developed last year does call for a periodic review of the process for developing the multi-year competitive planning program, so that we can decide if any adjustments to the policies, procedures, or methodology are warranted prior to the next biennial call cycle. The memo in your packet presents some highlights and staff observations from the call that we did for fiscal years 2025 through 2029. Kind of just to start you guys thinking for our discussion today. So since we do have several months before the next call for competitive projects, today's discussion is really just a starting point and should help us form our agendas for the coming months. As we all know, we only received 4 applications in our first stab at multi-year programming, and those applications requested funds only in the first 3 years of the program. This response was honestly a little bit disappointing, and so staff is looking for committee feedback today as project sponsors on why that response rate might have been so low. Anybody have thoughts on that? I know we heard from the counties kind of as we were wrapping up the cycle last year that, you know, the cycle was just a little bit tight last year for thinking out 5 years. Is that everyone's general sense of where we were with applications?
I'd like to offer, so Metro, to start off, Metro's very appreciative that we were able to, that the committee was supportive of 2 of our applications for this. But I do think that, and I recognize the desire for the committee to shift to a longer term program cycle, following the model of the CMAQ awards and other programs that have a multi-year funding cycle. I think the challenge with coming up with planning studies as are the general type of projects that are funded under UWP in that longer term horizon is that if you have a planning study that you're interested in doing, more often than not, you'd like to initiate that and move forward on that in a relatively short order, because unlike a construction project where there are other things that you can do, if you're planning out for a construction project 3 to 5 years in the future, you have design, planning, NEPA activities that you can undertake that are necessary to move forward with before construction happens for that. With a planning study, there generally isn't, or typically isn't, that what do we do from now? And so getting excitement for a planning activity and saying, this is something we really want to do, and we can't do it for 3 years or 4 years or 5 years and really can't take much action on it, is I think challenging. I think that's part of why the two applications that Metro did put forth that were successful were more in the range of data collection activities that we undertake periodically. So I think if this is the type of activity that I think the type of long-term funding cycle that this committee has moved towards really is going to lend itself towards those types of activities and not so much towards planning studies anymore, because planning studies are trying to identify it's a planning study, or I have something that I want to plan for, but I don't really want to start that planning for 4 to 5 years. And that's still thinking about something long-term that may happen after that. It's often, at least speaking for my own agency, that's often beyond our ability to plan out for the future. So I think that's one of the challenges with this. Absolutely, I understand the desire to have a longer term consistency and a understanding of that, but I think that is, this was a concern that we raised as we were moving towards this, and I think it's proven out that it's, I think part of it is the short call cycle that we had last year, that people may not have had longer term, long periods of time to consider what their future plans might be. But I think I'm in no way surprised that this is the result of this. And I think if this is a path that we continue on as a committee, that we're going to continue to see an under-programming of, or an undersupply of applications for these funds, and we'll miss out on the opportunity to move forward on things that people might want to do but aren't interested, especially as we move to the next funding cycle. If it follows if we were to get into a path where similar to CMAQ, where you're only funding you're adding 2 years to the program or adding a year to the program, but only to the end of the program each year. It's maybe a different scenario here, since we have unfunded or years in the out years of the program, which are currently lacking projects to fund for it. But if we were to move to a CMAQ style cycle, where you're only funding year 4 and 5 of a next 5-year program, I think you're going to continue to have these types of struggles because planning studies don't have those interim activities that you can do before you start a planning study, unlike a construction project where it has those pieces that happen before.
Thanks. Do you want to address that, Kama, or?
Yeah, no, I think that, that makes sense for sure. Planning for planning is a challenge. I think we all know that. But I wonder, what are the kind of cyclic planning activities that we do, right? Like every 4 years, we update a long range plan. Every however many years, your strategic plan gets updated, RTA's plans get updated. Do we know enough about those cycles to maybe take advantage of that, of this kind of 4 to 5 year programming? Or is that, again, something that maybe you're used to funding on your own and isn't what you would go after these funds for? Is there an opportunity to kind of flip that mentality to take advantage of multi-year programming here? I don't know, I'm kind of spitballing at the moment, but.
Thanks. Is there anyone else who has comments or questions or ideas?
Yeah, I was actually, I don't know if Scott is still on. I was going to actually ask if that is also the county's perspective. If there is sort of difficulty to look beyond a 3-year, let's say, time horizon for what counties might need.
I think this is Scott Hennings with McHenry County. I think there are some of those activities that are cyclical in nature. I mean, we update our long range plan, every 10 years. So we can kind of plan ahead for that. We typically do a transit plan and a bike plan update every 5 to 10 years as well. I think for the last call, I think what Kama mentioned earlier, that the short timeline really put a crunch on a lot of the counties submitting applications. I think that was more of a factor, was just sort of the accelerated timeline. But there are some things that for the next call, we can all plan ahead for at the county level and try to build into our application.
I mean, depending on how the committee feels about it, I'm kind of inclined at the moment to say, let's go through at least one more cycle of trying to build 4 to 5 year plans. Maybe we get into a situation where some of the more cyclic things can be planned out on that timeline, but we don't fully fill those out years so that there is space to slot in kind of the special studies earlier in the multi-year program. So.
This is Christina from CTA. I just had a couple points I wanted to add. Fully support Dave's remarks about the types of projects that we would be looking to use funding that would be potentially 5 years out for. And yeah, it's more data, it's more like GIS type of things. We have a backlog of projects that we're trying to find funding for now. And that don't necessarily have a shelf life of 5 years. And if there's a risk of applying for something 5 years out that you would have to seriously look at the scope again 5 years down the road to make sure it even makes sense. You'd still want to approach it the same way. Also, I mean, at the time last year, we communicated a lot of our reservations about the funding requirements and the spend down policies that were going to be taking effect in the out years of the program. And we still feel that that's a challenge for us. And I think we were looking to see kind of how the new methodology, the new system would be playing out and if folks were able to meet those timelines. So that's kind of just some of the things we notice.
Yeah, I just want to support everything that CT and Metro have been saying. I think these have been our talking points for years that we've been developing this. I don't know that we've necessarily changed our opinion on how we think this should be handled. I guess another question is, is there even a competitive call this year? Are we moving to an every other year with this?
It'll be every other year cycle. So we've already got FY26 is fully programmed as a result of our last call, and FY27 is partially programmed as a result of our last call. So a year from now, we'll be talking about programming for 27 through 8, 9, 10, 11, 31. So we would be filling out the rest of 27, 28, 29, 30, and 31 in that color. That would be the hope. You know, it sounds like we have some challenges ahead of us with trying to think that far ahead, and you know, maybe a hybrid approach to trying to partially fill with the cyclical, you know, the county's cyclical type stuff with the cyclical data needs, and then leave some space. You know, as a committee say, okay, we're not going to fully fund those years. We're going to leave some space to, you know, slot in these more short-term projects. Because I think it's an excellent point that the scope of a planning project definitely changes as leadership and administrations change, and just the environment around us, right? You know, we talk about this all the time. It's a part of the challenge of the work that all of us do is reacting to the changes that happen just naturally around us. So.
Is there anybody else? Okay, lots to talk about.
Yep, I have two more pieces if
Okay.
I can. So the second piece in the memo in the agenda was about scoring of applications. Just want to say that from staff's perspective, the scoring was pretty straightforward. I think that the spread of scores, even across the small sample size, appears to be sufficient for us to make programming decisions when we have a larger number of projects. I mean, it wasn't hard to make decisions in that last cycle because we were able to accommodate what everyone asked for. But I think that the scoring, and this has always been a concern in, you know, all of our funding programs, is if everybody scores 50 points, how do you prioritize, right? So we purposely, as a committee, set up that scoring system to give us some spread. It's not designed for anybody to get the maximum number of points. And I think, you know, again, from the small sample size, we felt like it was pretty successful last year. But you know, what I want to kind of throw out there for the committee is, was anybody surprised by the scoring results that we had? Or does anybody think that the scores aren't providing enough separation for us to make decisions, particularly thinking ahead to when we may have more applications to prioritize? None, it worked perfect. Awesome. Nothing's ever perfect and we'll always refine, but wanted to kind of throw those two core things out and, you know, think about as we go forward where we might need to make tweaks to individual scoring. The final thing was just thoughts on the application form. That was a multi-sheet Excel workbook that was kind of intended to reduce the number of individual forms that each applicant had to complete. It also provided an easy way for staff to kind of pull together everybody's application, summarize it, and you know, do that comparative scoring. Did anybody feel like there was, you know, heartburn to that format? Should we be looking for a better way to do this? Yeah, and I understand that most of the folks in this room probably didn't fill out the applications, but did you hear grumbling from others within your agency? I know there were a couple issues with some of the macros in the forms, but we got those worked out, so.
So I was one of those few, I suppose, in this room that, you know, filled out the form directly. Outside of kind of the new format and having to answer and give detail that we weren't used to, you know, it, you know, can make it work. Your guidance, of course, was quite helpful, you know, just kind of a back and forth, you know, kind of breaking through, familiarizing ourselves with the tool, the criteria, distributing the appropriate balances, certainly. And as you said, like, as an Excel tool, there can always be iterations that make it a little bit easier, you know, but for me, it was that initial adjustment, you know, coordinating internally, you know, communicating how this is different. Some expectations, you know, were, you know, expecting that it was going to be the same as previous years, you know, took some a little bit off guard, you know, but I don't think it was unmanageable. Or, I mean, if we're familiar with the policies, you know, the structure and what we're supposed to be getting this funding for, you know, the dots are there to be connected. So I wasn't overwhelmed or heartburn. So.
Perfect. Well, I definitely encourage all of the committee members to, seek some feedback from the folks on your staff that were involved on any of these things that we've just kind of thrown out there. Like I said, off the top of this item, this is kind of our first opportunity to think about, is there anything we want to talk about tweaking before we get to that next call for projects? So we do have, meetings scheduled November, and we haven't set next year's, but I would anticipate probably January, March timeframes. So there are more opportunities to talk about this. So, please talk to the folks back at your agencies, and, let us know so we can prepare for those discussions. And, I think starting something new is always difficult, and we're definitely committed. I know this committee's committed, staff is committed to, making sure we make this program work for everybody. So we can only do that if we can adjust to the things that don't go well. Now I'm done.
Thank you so much, Kama. So moving on, we have our FY 2025 update, closing out the new business today. And CMAP's finance staff is going to talk to us about FY 2025 contracts and invoicing procedures. Stephanie Pfeiffer will get us started, and we'll also hear from Justin Hardiman.
Good afternoon, everybody. So Stephanie Pfeiffer, she, her. I'm the deputy of planning at CMAP, but I am temporarily filling in as the interim finance deputy. And so I'm here in that capacity this afternoon. Maybe by the next time you see me, I'll be back in my planning role. But we just have a couple of slides. Just wanted to give you an update on some things that are coming down the pipe with regards to your subawards. So I do want to introduce you to some new team members. So we're going to do that first up. We want to just touch base with everybody on their subaward agreements, where we're at with that. And then wanted to cover just a little bit with regards to the reimbursements. So there's going to be a little bit of a change in process this year, and wanted to give you a heads up and a sneak peek at some of that. So starting off with just touch points and contacts. So there is going to be a little bit of a change. Again, I'm in an interim role, but we will be filling the finance deputy role. You'll continue to send your reimbursement invoices for the time being to that accounting at CMAP .illinois.gov email address. So thank you for continuing to do that. That helps us streamline the process. But a couple of things that are new this year. One, there's going to be project managers assigned to each one of the recipients of the subawards. And so those will be coming down the pipe. So in addition to having your finance connection, you're also going to have an individual on the TIP team who's going to be working with you on the requirements with the agreements as far as the performance measures and the like. So again, our intent this year is to provide more touch points for you. So you always have Kama and the others as a point of resource, but want to make sure that you have a multitude of different individuals to touch base with at the agency in case you have questions. And with that, I'm going to introduce my colleague who's going to be one of those points of contact permanently going forward with the finance team. And then he's going to go over some of the provisions with regards to the reimbursements. So turn to Justin.
Hello, I'm Justin Hardiman. I'm a finance specialist here at CMAP. My pronouns are he, him. You probably emailed back and forth with me just a little bit. I will be your new point of contact here at CMAP for the finance team. So anything that you guys need, any invoicing, any questions on what I just had a question yesterday, asking what a payment was for, anything like that. I will be your point of contact. My email address is jhardiman@cmap.illinois.gov. Next slide, please. So updates on the FY 25 subaward agreement. So we have all of our agreements signed. We're all good to go. We worked pretty hard on this, so we tried to get it out a bit quicker. We have had a lot of turnover in our department recently. Thank you guys for sticking with me. Thank you as I learned the process. It's been pretty difficult, but we're getting there. The competitive project invoicing. So for that, we're going to, once again, it's going to come to me, and we are going to preferably be billing once a month. So we'll get that out as soon as possible. We're trying to close all of our months on time. So that would be very helpful if we could get in an invoice every month for your reimbursements. Next slide. So the current submittal process is how we're going to stick with it until we get D365. So we're switching our ERP systems this year. So right now we're using one solution. We're going to continue using that until we get D365 off the ground. And when D365 is ready to go, I will reach out to all of you and provide trainings. I'm working currently with Plant Moran, and we're trying to make sure that all of that training is streamlined and ready to go for, just so it's easy. You won't have to spend hours and hours learning how to submit an invoice. So I know that can be very frustrating when processes change. We won't have that issue. So and next slide, please. And does anybody have any questions?
Yeah. So first question is, does anything change for projects that were before fiscal year 25 that are still being completed?
So the process will be for all of the active subawards when we get to that point. So one thing I just wanted to say too, so we had anticipated that we would have some of this already in place, so we are a little bit delayed on that. So with that in mind, we're going to definitely give you all a lot of a runway to be able to switch to the new process. So if you continue to do what you've been doing, we're going to honor that. It's going to be quite a while before we get to the point where we really permanently switch over to the new process. So just to put any anxiety at ease, you'll still be able to do what you've been doing. And with the new, just to give you a little bit of high level of the new system is right now, right, you're submitting invoices through the emails. Sometimes those get lost. We don't have a sort of a good way on either side to sort of track which ones we've done, which ones have been processed. With the new system, it'll be a portal where you all will have a login. You'll be a vendor on our system. You'll be able to log in. You'll be able to upload your invoice, and you'll be able to see exactly where it is in the process. You'll be able to see that we've received it, that it's going through, when the payment is expected. It'll also be a one-stop shop for us to be able to see all the invoices in one place that have been submitted in a year, so that we can also see if there's something that's missing. So there's a lot of benefits to the new system that'll be more transparent. There is going to be training though, and so that's where Justin's mentioning we'll definitely have some training sessions to walk you through how to log into the portal, how to upload things and the like. But it will be, to your question, it'll be all of the current agreements that we are paying out on would be part of this new approach. I did want to mention too, for those of you that were familiar back when Dan Olson was with the agency, Justin is really filling the same role that Dan Olson used to fill. And so, we didn't fill that role right away, but I think we really heard from all of you that it was really important to have that point of contact that you could touch base with and the finance team. And so Justin will be filling that role for those of you that remember Dan.
And then does this new system also include like a quarterly update, like a quarterly report system as well?
There will be, yes, we'll have the ability to be able to submit milestone submittals as well as part of this. So yes, it'll help streamline that process as well.
And in the meantime, we will continue to give you quarterly reports the way that we have been. They'll be a bit more frequent because we're staffed the way we should be. So you'll be seeing those from me on a regular basis. So.
Great. Are there any more questions? Okay, super. Thank you so much, Justin and Stephanie. Moving on, it is time for you to tell us any updates that you have going on in your programs. Do you have any updates on your UWP funded projects? Does anybody want to share about something exciting they've done? Okay. I'm not seeing a rush to share. Does anyone want to reserve some time on our next agenda to talk about something wonderful that you've been doing with your UWP funded projects? Well, how about if you go home and think about it? And then you can reach out to Kama and get yourself on the agenda for the next meeting, because it's great to hear what everybody's doing and successes that you all are having. So, do any members of the committee have any other business to bring to the committee? Seeing none, we'll move on to public comment. Staff did not receive any written public comment prior to today's meeting. I don't believe that we have any comment cards from in-person attendees. Do we have anyone joining us remote who would like to give public comment? Or anyone in the room that didn't already put in their card who wants to give public comment? Okay. Everybody's nice and quiet today. So we're going to go ahead and move on. Our next meeting is scheduled for November 13th, 2024 at 1 p.m. And the last reminder I'm going to give you is if you haven't signed in outside the door, please do that before you leave today so we make sure we have everybody in the minutes. With no other business before this committee, can I get a motion to adjourn?
So moved, RTA.
Thank you. Is there a second?
Second, CTA.
Excellent. All those in favor?
Aye.
All those opposed? Okay. We'll see you guys on the 13th.